Hi and welcome back to the channel. Yeah, as you might have guessed, I'm something of a Marvel fanboy, and I'm unashamed in that. But there are certain advantages to being a fanboy of Marvel. For instance, you can do things like this, and this, and a few other things. So it's been a great week because last Thursday night at 6 p.m. our lockdowns ended, and the coolest thing about that is that cinemas reopened at 6 p.m. on Thursday night. So I went down to my local and I saw Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Now, I've been a fan of this particular intellectual property since the 1970s. Now, I'm going to do a bit of show and tell here, so just bear with me. I first knew the character in this format, which is one of several Shang-Chi comics that I've got from the 1970s. I've got a lot of digital ones, but they're the physical copies that I've got. I also picked this up a little while ago, which is kind of groovy. Then, of course, I had to pick up one of the new ones, which is this. So the fanboy thing is happening big time with me with this intellectual property. And I put it out to the community of the channel whether I should review it after I saw it in the flea pit. And overwhelmingly people went, yeah, we're here for the review. So basically I'm going to review Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings for you in just a moment. And when I say just a moment, it's because I left my notes in the other room. The movie is directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, and it stars Simu Liu as Shang-Chi, the son of Wenwu, the Lord of the Ten Rings, who for 1,000 years has ruled a criminal organization about which the world doesn't know. Now, the Ten Rings dates back to one of the very first Marvel movies. In fact, if it wasn't for the Ten Rings, there would not be an Iron Man, because they were the guys who kidnapped Tony Stark and put him to work working on weapons, and he created the first Iron Man suit and all that stuff in the first Iron Man movie way back in 2008. So there's a long tail to this particular organization. It's only in this movie that we find out what the hell it's all about. And it's worth it. Now, there are a couple of things that people have criticized about it, and I'll address those straight away before I can go all fanboy and squeak. Yeah, it is an origin story for a superhero again, and people have told me, and have told everybody pretty much, that they're over those kind of origin stories. They're over that story arc of having a big bad, or as I put it in my notes, a big existential threat, a BET, which is Marvel's thing. Every movie has to have an existential threat to the world, or a world. So that's very much Marvel's thing, and I'm kind of okay with that because I want to see the different iterations they can do with that. I'm a big fan of their kind of mosaic storytelling, where they have a whole bunch of stories to make a bigger picture when put together. Haven't seen that before in cinema, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it's going. And inevitably there will be ones that don't do as well as others, but I think this one definitely does well. Simu Liu is good as Shang-Chi. He starts out, he's living in San Francisco with his best friend Katie, played by Awkwafina. They're parking cars for a living. Katie's family lives in San Francisco and they run a restaurant. So you've got the family background. There's some really nice Asian American cultural beats that happen at the start of the film. Taking your shoes off and paying respect to the grandmother of the family, played by Sai Chin, who has been in Western movies for a long time. She was in You Only Live Twice, amongst other things, and also played Fu Manchu's daughter in at least one of the Christopher Lee Fu Manchu movies. So it's nice to see her again. And so you get all of these kind of cultural beats, the way that Shang-Chi, and who's known as Sean, whose anglicized name is Sean, and Katie doesn't know he has another name until 15 years after they first met. But they kind of relax by going out drinking and doing karaoke and having fun together, and just kind of living their lives at the level they want to. But then Sean is attacked on a bus, and you've seen the footage of the bus fight. And Katie finds out that Sean is actually Shang-Chi, and that his father is Wenwu, played by Tony Leung, who is as charismatic as hell and has been going for 1,000 years because of the 10 magical or scientifically advanced rings that he has that hold his power. We get at the start of the film, and we see the start of the relationship between Wenwu and Shang-Chi's mother, Yang Li. So Shang-Chi's father, Wenwu, and his mother, Yang Li, meet when Wenwu is looking for the mystical kingdom of Ta Lo, which he knows is in a bamboo forest somewhere, but it's very hard to get to. So as he was trying to search for this mystical city, which apparently has all the riches of the world in it, or something like that, he meets Yang Li, and they fight. And it's beautiful. It's a kind of crouching tiger, hidden dragon kind of fight, done beautifully well. The choreography, the fight choreography is great. The special effects are great. The evocation of the entrance to this magical alternate universe, this other dimension. There are some incredible moments of beauty in this movie, even though it is a superhero origin film. And the kind of courtship fighting that Yang Li and Wenwu do is wonderful. And we see the early life where Wenwu gives up his criminal organization and he marries and has 2 children, Shang-Chi being the oldest one, and his sister, Jia Ling, is the younger, and as a female, her father doesn't pay her much attention. When some of Wenwu's enemies attack his home and kill his wife, he then retakes up the cudgel and becomes the leader of the 10 Rings once more. I'm not going to go too much further into spoilers than that, but just to say that the setup is pretty good, and the movie does a whole bunch about the relationships in families and the nature of families and how important family is, particularly in the context of East Asian cultures. But people go to these kind of superhero movies for the fights, and you get the big bus fight at the start, which is fantastic and very much has a Jackie Chan flavour to it. Simu does really well in the fight scenes. He trained really hard. The fight choreography is on point. You know exactly where everyone is and what everyone's doing at every moment. None of this shaky cam crap that we had about 10 years ago. It really does work. And then there's a fight outside a building in Macau on the scaffolding outside the building, which has very much slightly Jackie Chan flavour, but very much a more acrobatic, almost parkour kind of flavour to it. And then there are a number of other fights leading up to the big bad, where there are escalations and magic and superpowers come into it, but they're still done in an incredibly beautiful context. Simu Liu is good as Shang-Chi. Awkwafina is really good as Katie. Not quite a comic sidekick, but almost a kind of Jiminy Cricket conscience character for him. We have the wonderful Michelle Yeoh playing his aunt Nan, whom they see when they enter the kingdom of Ta Lo. And of course you've got Tony Leung playing Wenhua. Tony Leung has the most expressive eyes on a human being ever. All you've got to do is look at the eyes of Tony Leung, as has been said in Accented Cinema's YouTube channel. The eyes of Tony Leung tell you everything his character has seen. He acts with his eyes, and in this one he very much does that. Wenwu could have been done as a simplistic bad guy character, but there's a complexity and a logic to what he does and the reasons he does it. And that really gives the movie more depth than I really expected it to have. And I like that a lot. Now, as far as Ta Lo is concerned, the magical kingdom of Ta Lo, which is full of East Asian mythical creatures, when you've actually... that blew me away. Because just seeing a nine-tailed fox sitting up on a rock, and guardian lions and all sorts of other creatures, including a hundun, and you might want to Google what a hundun is, and somebody who's a callback to an earlier Marvel movie and is very much a welcome addition to the film, is a lot of fun. It does all the fan service in the best possible way. It doesn't just dump it there as fan service, it integrates it to the plot really well, and it gives us more of characters that we like. And that's a really solid way of doing it. I think that the movie is one of the better recent Marvel films. And when I say recent, there haven't been any that I've seen for a little while. I've been watching the TV stuff, but as far as the movies are concerned, it's introducing a whole suite of new characters, a whole different mythology to the Marvel universe. And even though there are some callbacks to other characters, Wong turns up, as everyone knows. Benedict Wong's character, Wong from Doctor Strange, turns up in a very different context. And one character from one of the very first Marvel Cinematic Universe movies turns up as well. And it's good to see both of them. I really enjoyed their scenes together. There's 2 post-credit sequences if you haven't seen it. And in this one, the escalation to the big existential threat is really well done. I think that there are solid reasons why it's done that way. And it just so happens along the way that Shang-Chi finds his superpowers, which are not the same as Shang-Chi develops in the comics. The comics have very different abilities for the character, which has had now, a 40-year career almost, and has gone through a lot of changes. The original Shang-Chi was the son of Fu Manchu, and Fu Manchu being an incredibly problematic creation of English imperialism isn't a part of this film, and rightly so. Even though I do like the Christopher Lee Fu Manchu movies, in spite of myself, I don't think they have a place in Here and Now. Other people may disagree, but just to wrap it up on Shang-Chi, I like what it does, I like how it does it. I really like the representation as well. I think telling stories from a different cultural viewpoint and giving the creative people from different cultures an opportunity to tell stories, not their own stories, because of course there are no real dragons as far as I know. There are no nine-tailed foxes as far as I know, and if there are, I show them respect. But for me, seeing that representation and seeing a superhero narrative and giving it that cultural difference, I think is useful. Of course they do it to make money, but that's okay. I think that for people, particularly children from various Asian backgrounds, seeing representation on the screen matters a lot. Seeing your own people on screen matters a lot. I know for me in the 1970s, when Ozploitation started, seeing places I know and character types I know and things that I know meant a lot to me as a person sitting in the cinema, because for too much of my early life the only things we could see were either English or American movies. So I've got a little bit of an insight into how representation works and how much it's an important part of a cinema experience. But just to wind it up, I enjoyed the film a lot. I actually got quite emotional being back in the cinema after the lockdowns. I was in the gold class cinema, which is really nice. There are only about 20 seats in it and they all recline. And serving people bring you food when you requested it. And it's kind of a nice experience. But just being back in a cinema with a cinema audience, all of it's masked and socially distanced and all of that. But just having that experience again, which is one of my safe places, was an incredible emotional moment for me. Just sitting there before the movie started, when the Marvel Studios thing rolled up, and knowing that I was seeing a movie in a cinema again, and that all the hard things we did to get through the lockdowns and to get through the COVID pandemic before we had vaccines, all of that kind of stuff was worth it, because we had to deal with it, and now we're heading towards the other end of it, hopefully. And so all of those joys of being in a cinema and watching a cool film that I really enjoyed was a good moment for me. It was a good time for me. It was a good day for me. Next week I'm seeing Eternal. So from our point of view, right where I am, we have 2 big Marvel Cinematic Universe movies opening within a week of each other. And I don't think that's happened before anywhere else in the world, and it's kind of cool. So Sally and I are going to go see Eternals next Thursday. I'll do a review of that next Wednesday, I think. I'll still have the Saturday ones for the science fiction. But just to summarise, being such a long-term fan of a particular intellectual property and then seeing it done well and seeing it done properly and with respect to not only the original character, but the culture from which it purportedly came is great. I really enjoyed this. I want to see more Shang-Chi movies. The movie did really well at the box office, so good. I want to see more of the character. Like I said, 2 post-credit sequences. If you haven't seen it yet, it is coming out on Disney Plus on November 11th. And if you have that subscription service, you don't have to pay any more to see it. But I recommend that you see it on a big screen if you can, and if you can't, watch it on your flat screen, because it's a worthwhile piece of superhero cinema. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm getting emotional again just thinking about going back to the cinema. I'm a tragic when it comes to these kind of things. But anyway, look after yourself, stay safe, follow the instructions, get the jab if you haven't, and if you haven't, why the not? So if you like this video, please consider subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and giving it a thumbs up, and let me know what you thought of the movie and what movies you're looking forward to seeing. You can support the channel as well by going to patreon.com/paleocinema and donating a little money towards getting my bum on a seat in the cinema. So as usual, watch some good superhero movies, watch some bad superhero movies, watch some culturally different superhero movies, and I'll catch you next time.